Welcome, listeners. We have Dr. Shawn Andrews with us today, who is an international keynote speaker, organizational consultant, and author of the best-selling book, The Power of Perception, Leadership, Emotional Intelligence, and the Gender Divide, which she's done a bunch of research on. The new book is The Five Levels of Male Allyship, a guide to building better teams through real inclusion. And she lends her expertise to the global conversation on allyship and inclusion, which is a perfect fit here for our listeners. She shared her ideas on the TEDx stage, debunking bias, perceptions of male and female leaders, and has worked with over 100 organizations, been interviewed for a bunch of podcasts, including NPR, the radio show. And she's also a professor at UC Irvine Business School, teaching courses on diversity and inclusion at work, organizational behavior, and business communications. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I know I got a chance to like early read this great book, and as far as I'm concerned, we can have a whole bookshelf filled with allyship books. We need lots more content, lots of ways to reach folks, especially in these weird times. Maybe start there, Shawn. What led you to write this book? And you have a co-author, we should mention, Michael
Yes.
O'Brien, who also participated. So there's some good different gender perspectives here. But what led you and Michael to writing this?
So yeah, it's a great question. So my original research is actually, if stemming back to my dissertation when I was in school, was on women in leadership. And I looked at all the barriers that women encounter in the workplace today. And I also looked at leadership and emotional intelligence from a gendered perspective. So it's
Mhm.
always been kind of have a gender slant, women in leadership. So I've been talking and speaking and about that for 10 years and wrote the first book, Power of Perception, was based on that research. So after being out, in the field, I guess, getting some experience talking to audiences, the more talks I did, the more I realized that we will not get anywhere close to parity, gender parity, racial parity, or any other type of parity without men on board. I mean, we simply will not get close. And so when I came to that realization, I realized that we really need to do more to reach men because we need to invite men into the inclusion conversation. And no matter how many, books we write or how many talks we give or how many classes we teach, we have to have men. We simply won't get there with the sheer numbers of people who want parity because men are still in the vast, uh, vast majority of decision positions of decision making power. So basically,
True.
across industries across the world, men still hold those decision making positions. So, anyways, I came to that realization, and it was stayed in the back of my mind for a couple years. And then you mentioned my co-author, Michael O'Brien. So, Michael and I were both involved with the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, which is a women's focused organization. But he, being a champion, being an advocate, he was all in and was actually president of the New York chapter, and I was president of the Orange County, California chapter. So we invited Michael out to give a talk for our chapter, and his talk was on how to invite men into the inclusion conversation. Now, this is in 2020, right before COVID hit. And I remember sitting in a room and I'm listening to Michael talk about men, and he alluded to men at different, like he didn't call them levels, but different segments. And basically, if anyway, if you have any type of marketing background, if you think of like marketing segmentation, it was similar to that. And I thought, wow, no one is really talking about men at segments. Nobody's talking about this topic. At least I had not heard anybody talking about that topic. So we struck up friendship, and his talk stayed in the back of my mind for the next couple of years. And I just kept coming back to it. And I'm like, we have to have men. We're not doing enough. We're not making enough impact without men. And so I finally decided, you know what, I really want to pursue this further. I want to dig deeper. And so I reached out to Michael and I said, Michael, I want to write a book. Would you like to contribute to it? And he was all in, to do that. And so I sent out book proposals, got a publisher, Amplify Publishing Group, and here we are. So, so yeah, got the publisher. Michael was fully on board. He's been a great partner and co-author, and that's what led to the five levels of male allyship. So we actually looked at men. looked at the different levels, created distinct archetypes based on our research with descriptions, examples, stories of each level, and why men sit at different levels. So that's actually what led to it. It's kind of a segmented approach, but then it gives nice clarity and definition around meeting men where they're at,
Yeah.
and how can we help support men in moving up to be higher levels of allies. And then along the journey, I also realized that, do women have these same segmented levels? They absolutely do. And so do organizations, which is a whole fascinating conversation as well. So there are even companies that you could, your listeners could probably think of that are at these different levels of
Yeah.
support.
Well, what I love about it is, well, one, I learned this lesson the hard way in 2017 when I first started writing about men as allies. I made the working assumption that they were already wanting to be allies. They just didn't know how. So I did the
Mm.
how-to guide. And then the feedback was, Julie, I don't think they're there yet. Like, I don't think that everyone's ready for this. Like, hmm. And we clearly have seen that over the last few years. But I also like that you don't address men as a monolith. That is feedback that we get consistently. Like, I'm so tired of being called a white male, like we're all the same. And there's a stigma, again, associated with that. And so you segment men by kind of readiness level across this like continuum of different levels. And what I also love is there's an assessment where you can assess where you think you are, or even I imagine your organization, to your point. And so you know kind of your starting point. So you can meet people where they're at with content. Let's start, Dr. Andrews, with the first level, the more traditionalist level. Tell me more about that starting point and what's in the way for them.
Yes. So men at this level, so level one, the traditionalists, and we've had other names for these levels, and we decided traditionalist was probably the best name for this particular group. But there are actually two groups of men at level one. One group of men, so the characteristic that defines level one is resistance. So
Mm,
these men are just generally resistant against parity, against DEI. They don't buy into the arguments. They're not on board. They're not interested, but they're resistant for different reasons. So the first group of men at level one are men would you consider toxic masculinity. So so these men have, again, a complete resistant to women's organizations. They don't buy into any parity arguments, DEI arguments. Uh, so they're a small vocal group of men and who have an extreme expression of masculine behavior or an immature expression of masculine behavior. Now, I do like to point out that masculinity itself is not toxic. So for your male listeners, this is good news, right?
yeah,
Masculinity is not toxic. It's the extreme expression of that behavior.
right,
So
right.
think of actually if there's a documentary that just came out a few weeks ago on Netflix called Inside the Manosphere. That's the
I've
men we're
watched
talking
it.
about here. Yes.
Yeah, I had no idea that this was a thing. It is a real thing. Because at first, when I was watching Manosphere, and listeners, definitely a plug for this, it's eye-opening and just a good
It is.
conversation to have. But like, I was like in denial, like, no way. And then as it goes on, it's like, oh, wow, there is a lot of this, a lot of, and a lot of men that follow folks that are influencers in this space too, which is
Hmm.
problematic.
Hmm. And it's a growing this manosphere behavior, toxic masculinity behavior it's a growing trend, especially among young men and boys.
Mhm.
And yeah, from the documentary shows, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of young men who follow these influencers.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so these guys are the extreme expression. The Manosphere, I think, really does a good job explaining the whole mindset around it, but they're extreme traditionalists. They believe in one-sided monogamy. The documentary talked about that men can go have affairs with other women, but the women they're with can't. But it's complete, it's just complete double standards. It's complete toxic behavior. So, but again, if you look at the general population, they are a small group. So
Hmm.
they're one segment. So those men too, I do want to mention, they would be considered unreachable as allies.
Hmm.
But they're one small segment that's in level one. The other segment that's in level one, or the other group, are not are men who do not display toxic masculinity behaviors, but they're still resistant. Now, why are
Hmm.
they resistant? They're resistant for a number of reasons. They're maybe scared, defensive, they're angry. They fear of losing their status, of being wrong, or one of the most scary things, no longer being relevant in today's society. So,
Yep.
so they have these fears that's driving this resistance. And again, they also have that same pushback that the other group does. They may have a complete discounting of women or women's organizations, and they view parity as a zero-sum game, as
Yep.
a men lose game. So resistance is the characteristic that generally defines men in this group, and there are reasons why, men sit here. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the level
Yeah. No, I mean, I
list.
get it. I found that a lot in my research for my latest book about people with power. It's that fear of irrelevance, the zero-sum game, all risk, no reward. To me, what stuck out to them versus the next phase, which is the armchair ally, is they're kind of like in denial almost even. I know you use the word resistance, but I thought it's like they just don't think it's a problem. And the armchair ally to me, I think they recognize it's a problem, but they're like, but I didn't do this. Like I don't have anything to do with that. Tell us more about the level two.
Yeah, so that's such a perfect segue. So level two guys, the comfort zone is what defines them.
Yeah.
So they're comfortably in their zone, but there's also two groups of men that we found from our research in this group. The first group I like to call blissfully ignorant. So they are completely unaware that there's still an issue going on. They think the whole gender parity or gender equality argument was solved years ago. It's
Yep.
not a big issue now. So they're unaware. They're in a bubble. They have a limited perspective. To them, business is good. They experience no pain. They may experience privilege in their roles, and they just don't see a need or an urgency. Okay, that's one group of men. The other group of men do recognize that there's an issue. Okay, we do have some significant gaps in race and leadership and representation, uh, but they're not willing to dedicate political capital. So to them,
Hmm.
they don't have a dog in the fight.
Hmm.
So these men are not the blissfully ignorant group. They're the group that does recognize it, but not enough to dedicate time, not enough to have the important conversations behind the scenes that really would help impact their female colleagues or their colleagues of color. So basically, they don't put it out there. They don't buy into parity arguments. They feel that they're not personally affected and that there's no urgency, and basically let the younger generation figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
didn't do this. Yeah, and I hear that a lot in my research. It's like a lack of what's in it for me. Like, what's in it for
Yeah.
me to get involved in this? So then level three is the toe tipper. Did I get that right?
Toe
I think,
dipper.
yeah, toe dipper. Right.
Toe dipper. Yeah.
So I think about this. I use this metaphor a lot in training. It's like, okay, there's the baby pool and there's the deep end, and there's a whole journey between these things. Let's not jump in the deep end first. Let's tip our toe in the baby pool. So that's kind of where level three is, that they're trying some things out. They're like, okay, there's an issue. Maybe I can help.
Yeah. So level three. Now, I personally have worked with a lot of level three men,
Yeah.
toe dipper men in my pharmaceutical career. So toe dippers are they're performative is the adjective that describes this group. Generally performative behaviors. So these are the men who will come out, for example, on International Women's Day and advocate for their female colleagues and say that women are great, we need more, equity and parity and everything else and go on and on. But then you don't hear or see anything the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So, they may only come out at certain times, perhaps Black History Month, and then you don't see a lot of advocacy the rest of the year. So they're saying the right things, but it's not demonstrated in their behaviors. Their support tends to be passive aggressive,
Hmm.
generally. They're not having also enough tough conversations behind the scenes that really impact women. So their behavior is mostly for personal gains. And I was Cheryl boss that I had in pharmaceuticals. He was, a guy's guy, very well liked by very well liked by everybody, but especially other men. And he was on the fast track to leadership, and
Mhm.
he knew how to say the right things and do the right things, but at certain times. So he was very strategic. So I also think men who are at level three toe dippers, they're also very politically savvy as far as how
Mhm.
to navigate the corporate world.
Yeah.
So at least that's what I found in my experience. So they're
Well, and
yeah.
that story that really stuck with me about your own experience of like, then we go to like a golf outing together because I
Yes,
know,
that's him.
women don't do the golf outing. That's where relationships and business is done. And so we're left out. So you proactively go with, there's all sorts of different behavior by this person. So it's like they're a chameleon, right? They know how to fit into different scenarios and show up and say the right things in one space and then also dial up the masculinity in another space.
That's a perfect capture, Julie. Yeah, exactly. And that's who I'm thinking about is when I said my previous boss, it was him.
And I'm thinking, in my experience, this is like 60% of the population is in this murky middle of like, all right, I want to do the thing, but I'm not sure how to do the thing. And I'm kind of nervous about doing the thing. So I'm going to stay in the safe lane. And then if someone really asks for my help, I will. And I'll show up for the performative, celebrations, but it's not genuine. Whereas level four, I think we're starting to get somewhere. The emerging ally, which I
Yes.
really appreciate because I want more men to be there, but especially over the last few years, I've seen such a retraction for where I think we got to level four and we've receded back a bit to level three in a lot of spaces I'm working with. But the level four is really interesting because they understand it, they want to participate, but they're kind of like I call them allies in training. Like they're bumbling, they're stumbling. Just like anything you learn, you're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes in this work all the time. Of course you do. But the risk we run there is that they make the mistake while they're learning and then they like withdraw or recede. Because as you say, this is a continuum. There's no arrival point on allyship. You can backslide and go through the continuum back
Yes.
and forth. But
Yeah.
what about the emerging ally? How can we help them stay there and get to level five?
Yeah. So in order to get to level to be an emerging ally, or I like ally in training, that's great. But men have to do a risk calculation at this point.
Yeah.
So let's say they're being performative in most of their behaviors, they're a toe dipper. So they have to, if they really are, if they generally care about being a better ally, then they have to do a risk calculation. So what type of, ally do they want to be? Who are they going to step up for? What kind of legacy do they want to leave? How are they going to be perceived in the eyes of their female colleagues, but also their male colleagues? So they have to do a calculation of, across several different topics. But once they've done that and they realize that, okay, I do want to step into allyship more, then they become level four. So these men are eager to learn, but they just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't know where to look, or they don't have the support. Another thing we found a common theme with a lot of men, even today, is still the bro club. Bro club
Mhm.
pressure is still alive and well today. So a lot of men, depending on industry, company, a lot of men still get teased for reaching out and supporting women or minorities or any underrepresented group. So that was a very real pressure in the stories that we heard in our interviews. And so they may not have the support they fully need,
Right.
in their current role to be an ally, but they're eager, they're willing to learn. So that's why we call them the emerging ally. So these men,
Yeah. Well, and I
yeah.
love your point about role models here are really
Mm,
important. So the negative peer pressure that you're feeling to kind of fit into bro culture can be the tailwinds, but the headwinds, as you say, or the headwinds actually is the bro culture, but the tailwinds rather are, hey, if you can get more positive associations with folks that are more towards level five that are doing this work and it's safe for them to do this work, then you're going to feel more safe doing it as well. So finding these ally networks, which you and I do a lot of that inside organizations, is cultivating these groups. Um, and then I want to get us to level five, which I thought was really interesting because you struggled with the label, and I always have struggled with this too, of like, what do we call these men that have like are doing the thing? And you landed on champion versus advocate and have good rationale in the book, and I understand why. It's funny because it reminded me of, again, 2017 when I first started doing this research, we didn't have the word even ally. So
Mm.
champion was the word I wanted to use. And I wanted to specifically call men man champions. My husband like quickly pointed out, like he was like, no, like that's not gonna go well. Like we don't want to be man champions. And women are like, oh, they win again. But in the context of level five leadership with the progression, I can understand how that word really describes that I'm in it for the right reasons. I'm championing gender equality because it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to keep showing up. And it's an intentional, consistent action here. So I'm curious, Shawn, like level five, like once someone's gotten there, or organization has gotten groups there, how do we keep them there?
Mm. Yeah. So these men, just for your listeners, so when you get to level five, they're a champion, they're an advocate, but these men generally are focused on we rather than me. So the
Hmm.
greater good, they're truly interested in helping their company, helping their colleagues, helping create a better world. These men have kind of broader goals in mind, and so we definitely need more men at this level. Um, One of the things that struck me is every male that we interviewed who identified as a level five champion, they didn't start there, but they've found their way there through the
Sure.
journey. Every single one of them felt that they still had more to learn. They did not see themselves really as a champion. I mean, in certain parts, but they all had a strong desire to do more. And that
Hmm.
really, I thought that was a really great sign. I felt very optimistic hearing that from them because they said, I'm making an impact, I know, but I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
So, how do we keep them there? To your question, I think we need to keep encouraging them, keep reinforcing the value and the impact that they're making as an advocate. And also, to your point about the role model thing, they are making a significant impact on other men in the organization.
Uh-huh.
What we found out is so after analyzing this, so the main question is, how do you really move the needle on allyship, right? We found that if you focus on levels 3 through 5, that's going to make the
Mhm.
biggest difference in helping move the needle on allyship or any type of parity that,
Yep.
whether it's
I
gender
would
or
agree.
racial or, um, you know, sexual orientation, gender identity, whatever
Yep.
it is. Um, so moving the needle, focusing on levels 3 to 5, and we do need these men to be, keep being consistent, keep showing up as advocates, but also as role models because the men at the lower levels, and this was almost consistent, we heard them say, well, if it's a colleague or a guy I respect,
Hmm.
I tend to follow his lead. So
Hmm.
uh, that goes a long way. Having a positive role model will significantly have a positive ripple effect on other men in the organization to step into their allyship and help move up levels. Um, and then also there's good old FOMO. I think men also we found at the lower levels, they don't want to be left behind. They don't want to be
Yeah.
irrelevant. And so they don't want to miss out. And so they thought, well, Mike and Jack and Fred are doing this. I really need to step up my
Yeah.
game. How could I learn more? So
Yeah.
so they become eager, maybe become level four. Maybe they were a toe dipper their entire career, and now they want to move into emerging ally because they have a friend or a colleague and they've seen him do it.
Yeah.
So there's tremendous power in this level. And I think we just need to keep encouraging the men that are there to keep on
Spread
keeping
the
on,
word.
keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, you're making a tremendous impact and we appreciate you and we need you.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me, I was just doing an allyship program kickoff last week for an organization, and it was a dozen or so men, and they're pretty high up in financial institutions, and so they're seeing the lack of women at the top of most organizations, let alone, finance is very male dominated at the top. And the question they asked me, which was really interesting, because a lot of level fives, I don't think they think they're level fives, to your point. They're like, I'm doing something, but I'm not doing enough. Like, sure, I've been coaching women for my whole career and I have a lot of women on my team, but like, am I really doing it? And it's like, yeah, that's evidence that you probably are. But the question they asked me, Sean, was how do I know? How do I know I'm doing it right? And I think that's such a beautiful question. And it was a question I honestly couldn't answer on the fly. I had to do some research and then wrote a blog post with some thoughts I had. But I'm curious, like how you would answer that question with your research. Like how do they know? Like how do you validate that you're at level 5?
Uh, I think the feedback that they're going to get, people, a couple things. So when I when I have given talks on this, even to women's groups, there's certain things you look for in an ally. So, for example, um, you know, being curious and willing to learn. I'll just list a few things here.
Yeah.
They're respectful and empathetic. Chances are, they actively listen. They verbally advocate for others. They hire. What does their team look like? Is their team diverse? Do they hire and
Mhm.
promote people, diverse people in their organization? Do they actively address biases and microaggressions?
Mhm.
And do they mentor and sponsor others? So
Yeah.
men at this level are likely doing these things, or at least some of these things, and they're likely getting feedback already in that space. So how would they know? So they would know from the people that they're mentoring, sponsoring, and being an ally for.
Mhm.
Um, they're going to they're going to know about the diversity of their teams.
Yeah.
Um, Other diversity, individuals will probably be approaching them for support.
Yep,
Um,
that was what I landed on. I was like, if people are coming to you for support, that's probably the best sign.
yeah, right, exactly. So if you're attracting diverse people, you're getting that positive reinforcement back. You get positive feedback about your openness and you're willing to listen and willing to learn. So I think they know. I think just from the journal feedback loop, but I also think it doesn't hurt to reinforce and tell them,
Mhm.
just in case they've missed the message
Yeah.
somehow. Um,
Validation is so important, I think, to keep people on the journey, especially when they feel like they're not doing enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, this is such fantastic. I really appreciate the disciplined approach to the research. The assessment piece is really powerful. Tell our listeners, like, where can they get a copy of the book and check out the assessment as well?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the assessment. So that's something. So in the back of the book, we have three tools that Michael and I created. The first tool is the assessment. So in first appendix. So we wanted to. So speaking of how do you measure it, how do you know?
Yeah.
So we wanted to provide a tool that gave not only men but also women. Women can also take the assessment. It's a
Mhm.
personal allyship assessment, and get a sense of what level you're at, and then we can go from there. So in the assessment, it's only 22 questions and it takes about 3 to 5 minutes. So it's very quick. And then it gives you a snapshot of your level and then gives you some tips. And then Michael and I also recorded videos for each level. So if you're at level 1 through 5, there's a unique video for you that you're going to see. And then we also provide a couple strategies and tips for each level. Now, there's many more strategies in the book. There are over 60 different strategies we provide for men to become better allies, from other men, from women, and then we also provide strategies for HR or culture leaders to create more inclusive,
Mhm.
allyship-based cultures. So, so the allyship assessment is free, it's easy, it's quick, and then you get a nice little snapshot of where you are, and some tools to get you started. Um, the second appendix is actually an ally matrix that we created for women specifically, and it's
Mhm.
it's a tool that I did in my doctoral program that way back in the day, and at the time it was very helpful in my own career because you sit down and there's a grid we provide, and you sit down and you list out 3 to 5 potential allies. And it
Mhm.
could be men or women that or maybe you don't have a relationship with, but you want to have a relationship. And you
Mhm.
rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 of the level of the relationship you have with that person, their level of influence, your level of communication, your level of trust. So
Mm.
you rank the quality of your relationship and then their influence, so their ability and willingness to support you. So it's a really helpful tool. And again, something that really helped me at the time in my own career to sit down and really think through this. And then you can start building relationships with
Yeah.
these folks.
Yeah. That's
And then
cool.
the third tool that we provide in the book is book club or discussion questions for groups. So
Yeah.
if any groups or teams want to help start the dialogue around allyship. So yeah, so the book's available everywhere, Amazon or any, wherever you get books. And it is an Amazon bestseller, I'm happy to say, already in a couple categories. So, but yeah, that's probably the best place to get it. And then, of course, my website. I don't know if you're going to share with your listeners,
Yeah,
but
please. Yeah,
yeah,
please.
it's drshawnandrews.com. So you can find out more. There's couple book pages in there for the books, and then find out more about me, and you can contact me through the website as well.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Andrews, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today and your research and tools. We'll be sure to link that in the show notes and check out the assessment, listeners. It's a great blueprint and place to get started.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jillian. This has been fun.